The Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) launched by China in 2013 has emerged as a cornerstone of China's foreign policy aimed at enhancing global trade and infrastructure development across over 140 countries. However, this initiative has raised significant concerns within the United States and among its allies who perceive it as a strategic threat that could alter the balance of global power in favor of China. Key concerns regarding the BRI. 1. Debt trap diplomacy. One of the most frequently cited threats from the BRI is the phenomenon of debt trap diplomacy. Critics argue that China provides loans to developing countries for infrastructure projects with terms that these countries cannot sustain. When they default, China gains control over critical assets. A notable example is Sri Lanka's Hambantota Port, which was leased to China for 99 years after Sri Lanka defaulted on its loans. 2. Geostrategic implications. The BRI is viewed as a means for China to establish military and logistical footholds in key regions. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC), a flagship BRI project, connects China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea, raising alarms about potential military applications and dual-use capabilities. 3. International response. In response to the BRI, the United States has launched initiatives like the Build Back Better World (B3W) to provide alternative infrastructure financing emphasizing transparency, sustainability, and adherence to international norms. 4. A technological competition. The BRI also intersects with technological rivalry, where the U.S. is concerned about Chinese influence in the digital domain and the potential for Chinese technologies to set global standards that could undermine democratic frameworks. Differences in perspectives. Different sources present varying perspectives on the BRI's implications. Some view it primarily as a tool for the Chinese Communist Party's CCP to extend its influence, while others frame it within the context of U.S.-China strategic competition, particularly amidst the Biden administration's evolving approach to engagement with China. Timeline of events. 2013, the BRI is announced by Xi Jinping. 2017, the initiative is incorporated into China's constitution as a national priority. 2018, the U.S. begins to vocally criticize the BRI, with officials warning countries of the potential risks. 2021, the Biden administration launches the B3W initiative at the G7 summit as a counter to the BRI. Strategic implications for the U.S. The BRI poses several strategic challenges for the U.S. and its allies. Influence on global norms. The BRI has the potential to reshape global norms and standards, favoring authoritarian governance and undermining the liberal international order established post-World War II. Undermining alliances. As countries engage with China through the BRI, there is a risk that long-standing U.S. alliances and partnerships could be weakened as nations may prioritize economic ties with China over traditional diplomatic relationships with the U.S. Military access and control. China's control over critical infrastructure such as ports and logistics hubs developed under the BRI can potentially provide military advantages and impact U.S. military operations in conflict scenarios. Conclusion. While positioned as a development initiative, the BRI is perceived by the United States and its allies as a strategic maneuver that threatens to shift the global balance of power. In response, the U.S. has initiated counter-strategies to provide alternatives for developing nations, reaffirming the importance of a rules-based international order. The ongoing competition between the U.S. and China in this context highlights the complexities of modern geopolitical dynamics and the challenges of navigating international development without succumbing to zero-sum competition. Which projects of China's Belt and Road Initiative pose a threat to the United States? The Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) is an ambitious global development strategy adopted by China in 2013 aiming to enhance infrastructure and promote economic connectivity across Asia, Europe, and beyond. While the BRI is framed as a beneficial initiative for global development, it is perceived by the United States and its allies as a strategic maneuver that poses several threats to U.S. national interests and the established global order. 1. Debt trap diplomacy. One of the most cited concerns regarding BRI projects is the concept of debt trap diplomacy. Critics argue that China extends loans to countries with little regard for their debt sustainability, leading to financial strain and ultimately control over critical infrastructure. For instance, Sri Lanka's Hambantota Port is often highlighted as a prominent example. After defaulting on its loans, Sri Lanka was forced to lease the port to a Chinese company for 99 years, effectively ceding control of a strategically located asset. Such practices raise alarms that other countries could find themselves similarly indebted and compromised, thereby increasing China's geopolitical leverage in regions traditionally influenced by the U.S. 2. Geostrategic footholds. The BRI facilitates China's establishment of military and logistical footholds in key regions, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) connect China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea, raising concerns about the dual-use nature of such infrastructure. Gwadar Port, a significant node in CPEC, has been criticized for its potential military applications, as it could serve as a base for the Chinese Navy, thereby altering the balance of power in a region critical to U.S. interests. 3. Compromised sovereignty. BRI projects often lead to compromised sovereignty for participating nations. Countries that engage with China may find their political and economic independence undermined due to the conditions tied to Chinese loans. This is particularly troubling for U.S. allies who could be coerced into aligning their policies with Chinese interests. The erosion of national sovereignty could destabilize alliances and diminish the U.S.'s ability to influence regional affairs. 4. Technological competition and digital Silk Road. The BRI is not limited to physical infrastructure, it also encompasses a digital dimension known as the Digital Silk Road. This initiative involves the export of Chinese technology and standards, which could lead to the global proliferation of Chinese surveillance technology and authoritarian governance models. The U.S. fears that such advancements could undermine democratic institutions and norms globally, as countries that adopt Chinese technology may also adopt its governance practices. 5. Supply chain vulnerabilities. China's investment in critical infrastructure such as ports and railroads positions it to control vital supply chains. For example, control over ports allows China to prioritize its exports and influence commodity prices, potentially impacting U.S. economic interests. In a conflict scenario, such control could hinder the U.S. military's logistical capabilities, as China could restrict access to essential routes or impose tariffs that disrupt supply chains crucial for U.S. operations. 6. Expanding influence in Europe and Africa. China's BRI has garnered significant support in Europe and Africa, where many countries are eager for investment in infrastructure. This expansion poses a challenge to U.S. influence in these regions, which have been traditionally viewed as areas of American interest. For instance, the BRI has led to the establishment of infrastructure projects across Eastern Europe, raising concerns among U.S. policymakers about diminishing Western influence and the potential for China to reshape global norms in its favor. 7. The response from the United States. Recognizing these threats, the U.S. has initiated counter-strategies such as the Build Back Better World B3W initiative launched by the G7. This initiative aims to provide developing countries with alternatives to the BRI that emphasize transparency, sustainability, and adherence to international standards. The U.S. is also focusing on strengthening alliances and partnerships to counter China's influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. 8. Counterintuitive insights. Perception versus reality. While the BRI is often framed as a purely economic initiative, many analysts argue that its primary function is geostrategic. The counterintuitive aspect is that countries engaging with the BRI often perceive it as an economic opportunity, while the underlying implications may lead to long-term dependency on China. Investment versus coercion. Although BRI projects are marketed as investments, they can lead to coercive relationships that undermine the sovereignty of recipient nations. This duality raises questions about the true costs of engagement with China. Global norms. The BRI is seen as a vehicle for promoting authoritarian governance as an acceptable global norm, which contrasts sharply with the democratic ideals promoted by the US and its allies. Misjudged risks. Many developing countries view participation in the BRI as a necessary step for economic growth, often overlooking the potential long-term consequences of becoming entangled in China's strategic aspirations. Conclusion. In summary, the Belt and Road Initiative poses multifaceted threats to U.S. interests globally. The implications of projects under the BRI extend beyond mere economic development. They encompass strategic control, technological influence, and the reshaping of global governance norms. As the U.S. navigates this complex landscape, it must develop robust responses that not only address the immediate challenges posed by the BRI but also foster sustainable alternatives that promote democratic values and sovereignty for participating nations. The evolving dynamics of U.S.-China competition highlight the necessity for a nuanced understanding of how infrastructure investment can serve as a vehicle for geopolitical influence. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI, while often discussed in terms of infrastructure growth and economic development, has significant implications for global geopolitics, particularly in relation to the United States. Below are some important aspects of the BRI that are frequently overlooked along with their significance. 1. Debt trap diplomacy. Overlooked aspect. The concept of debt trap diplomacy refers to how China extends loans to countries that may not have the capability to repay, leading them to concede control over critical infrastructure. This is often framed as a financial arrangement but has profound geopolitical ramifications. Significance. The strategic implications of this practice can lead to shifts in power dynamics in favor of China. For instance, Sri Lanka's inability to repay its loans resulted in the leasing of Hambantota Port to a Chinese company for 99 years, effectively giving China a foothold in a strategically significant maritime location. Such instances can erode U.S. influence in regions traditionally aligned with Western interests and can foster dependency on China, undermining the rules-based international order established post-World War II. 2. Geostrategic military implications. Overlooked aspect. The BRI is often seen solely through an economic lens, but it has substantial military implications, particularly with projects that have dual-use capabilities, civilian and military. Significance. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC), a flagship BRI project, is designed to link Western China to the Arabian Sea, enhancing not only trade but also military logistics. The Gwadar port, developed under CPEC, has potential military applications such as accommodating naval vessels. Control over such strategic sites allows China to project power in the Indo-Pacific region, complicating U.S. military operations and potentially altering the balance of power. 3. Technological competition and digital Silk Road. Overlooked aspect. The BRI extends into the realm of technology through the Digital Silk Road, which focuses on establishing China's digital infrastructure in partner countries. Significance. This initiative aims to set global technological standards that favor Chinese companies, potentially undermining U.S. technological dominance. By promoting its surveillance technologies and digital infrastructure in developing countries, China could influence local governance and societal norms, posing a challenge to democratic values and human rights, which are central to U.S. foreign policy. 4. Erosion of sovereignty. Overlooked aspect. Many countries participating in the BRI are often unaware of the long-term implications of accepting Chinese loans, including the erosion of their sovereignty. Significance. As countries become more indebted to China, they may find their domestic policies influenced or dictated by Chinese interests. This can lead to a loss of autonomy in decision-making, where countries may prioritize Chinese demands over their own national interests. This erosion of sovereignty can have cascading effects on regional stability and international relations, making it difficult for the U.S. to engage effectively with these nations. 5. Impact on U.S. alliances and partnerships. Overlooked aspect. while the BRI is often discussed in the context of US-China rivalry. Its implications for US alliances and partnerships are critical but less frequently highlighted. Significance: the BRI's extensive reach threatens to weaken US partnerships in Asia, Africa, and beyond. Countries that align with China for economic benefits may drift away from US influence, creating new geopolitical landscapes that challenge US interests. As countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka become economically tied to China, the US may find it harder to exert influence in these regions, undermining long-standing strategic alliances. 6. Internal challenges within China. Overlooked aspect: the BRI is often viewed as a purely outward-facing initiative, but it also reflects internal challenges within China such as economic overcapacity and regional disparities. Significance: China's need to alleviate domestic economic pressures, particularly in its less developed Western regions, drives the BRI. This internal motivation suggests that the initiative could face sustainability issues. If economic conditions worsen in China, or if participating countries begin to reject Chinese investment due to perceived predatory practices, the BRI could falter, impacting China's global ambitions and its ability to maintain influence. 7. Environmental concerns. Overlooked aspect: the environmental implications of BRI projects are frequently overshadowed by economic discussions. Significance: many BRI projects have been criticized for lacking environmental sustainability and transparency, which could lead to ecological degradation in host countries. As global awareness around climate change and environmental sustainability increases, countries may push back against BRI projects. This backlash could create opportunities for the US to promote alternative initiatives that align with sustainable development goals, positioning the US more favorably in the eyes of global citizens. Conclusion: the Belt and Road Initiative represents a complex interplay of economic ambition and geopolitical strategy. While the immediate focus may be on infrastructure and investment, the underlying implications for international relations, particularly concerning US interests, are profound and multifaceted. Recognizing these overlooked aspects is crucial for developing effective counter-strategies and engaging meaningfully with affected nations. Ignoring these dynamics could lead to significant shifts in global power structures that undermine US influence and the established international order. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI, launched by China in 2013, aims to create a vast network of infrastructure projects to improve trade and investment across over 140 countries. However, this initiative is viewed with suspicion by the United States and its allies, who see it as a potential threat to their geopolitical interests. For key points warrant in-depth analysis and discussion regarding how specific BRI projects may pose a threat to the US. 1. Debt trap diplomacy. A significant concern surrounding the BRI involves allegations of debt trap diplomacy, where China allegedly offers loans to developing countries that are unable to repay them, resulting in the ceding of control over critical infrastructure to China. This strategy has been observed in Sri Lanka, where the Hambantota Port was leased to China for 99 years after the Sri Lankan government defaulted on loans. Such practices could lead to increased Chinese influence in strategically important regions, undermining US interests and alliances, especially in the Indo-Pacific. 2. Geostrategic implications of key projects. Specific BRI projects such as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) have significant military and logistical implications. CPEC connects China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea, enhancing China's ability to project power in the region. The development of Gwadar Port under CPEC raises concerns about potential dual-use capabilities for military purposes, thereby altering the balance of power in favor of China. This could threaten US interests in ensuring freedom of navigation and maintaining regional stability. 3. International responses and counter-strategies. In response to the perceived threat of the BRI, the US has initiated counter-strategies like the Build Back Better World B3W initiative, which aims to provide alternative infrastructure development options to developing nations. This initiative emphasizes transparency, sustainability, and market-driven approaches, contrasting with the allegedly predatory practices of the BRI. The success of B3W may determine the U.S.'s ability to maintain influence in regions targeted by the BRI, showcasing the need for a coherent and competitive strategy against China's growing reach. For technological competition and the digital Silk Road, the BRI is not limited to physical infrastructure, it also encompasses digital infrastructure through the Digital Silk Road, which aims to enhance China's technological influence in participating countries. This poses a direct challenge to the U.S. in the realm of technology standards and cybersecurity. As China seeks to establish technical standards through its investments, the U.S. must develop its own technological frameworks to counterbalance this influence and protect its strategic interests in the digital realm. In conclusion, while the BRI is presented as a development initiative, it is perceived as a strategic maneuver by China that could jeopardize U.S. interests and alter the global balance of power. The U.S. response through initiatives like B3W underscores the necessity of offering viable alternatives to developing nations, reinforcing the idea that international development should not devolve into a zero-sum game between China and the U.S. Here are three famous historical cases that illustrate similar themes of geopolitical competition, infrastructure initiatives, and influence over developing nations. 1. The Marshall Plan 1948–1952. The Marshall Plan, formerly known as the European Recovery Program, was an American initiative aimed at providing economic aid to Western European countries after World War II. The plan allocated over $12 billion, approximately $130 billion in today's dollars, to help rebuild economies, stabilize governments, and prevent the spread of communism. The U.S. sought to counter Soviet influence in Europe by fostering economic stability and promoting democratic governance. This initiative not only revitalized European economies but also solidified U.S. political and economic interests in the region. The Marshall Plan is often viewed as a successful example of how economic assistance can be utilized to influence geopolitical outcomes, akin to how the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) operates in contemporary contexts. 2. The Cold War and the Soviet Union's influence in Africa, 1950s to 1990s. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union sought to expand its influence in Africa through various means, including military support, economic aid, and the construction of infrastructure projects. Countries such as Egypt and Angola received significant Soviet investment to bolster their economies and military capabilities, which the USSR viewed as a way to challenge Western hegemony. This effort often involved leveraging the vulnerabilities of newly independent states seeking development assistance. The geopolitical competition between the U.S. and the Soviet Union during this period mirrors the current dynamics of U.S.-China relations, where investment in infrastructure is used as a tool for expanding influence. 3. The United States' involvement in Latin America, 20th century. Throughout the 20th century, the U.S. engaged in various initiatives in Latin America, often under the banner of promoting democracy and economic development. The Alliance for Progress, launched in 1961, aimed to foster economic cooperation and development in Latin America through substantial financial aid and investment. However, it also served as a means for the U.S. to counter perceived communist threats in the region, particularly during the height of the Cold War. The U.S. often intervened in the political affairs of Latin American countries to ensure favorable regimes, which is reminiscent of concerns today regarding China's influence in the region through initiatives like the BRI. These historical cases exemplify how major powers have utilized economic initiatives and infrastructure projects as tools of geopolitical strategy, similar to the current context surrounding China's Belt and Road Initiative and its implications for U.S. interests. The Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), launched by China in 2013, has significant implications for global geopolitics, especially concerning the United States. As the BRI expands, the U.S. perceives it as a threat to its global influence, posing multiple strategic challenges in the coming years. Key projects posing threats to U.S. interests. 1. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC). This flagship BRI project connects China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea. It includes significant infrastructure investments such as roads, railways, and energy projects totaling around $62 billion. The strategic location of CPEC allows China to gain access to critical maritime routes and could enable military access to the Arabian Sea, undermining U.S. interests in the Indo-Pacific. 2. Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka leased this port to China for 99 years after defaulting on loans. This situation exemplifies debt trap diplomacy, where countries become economically dependent on China, undermining their sovereignty and potentially allowing China to establish military bases in significant maritime choke points. 3. Gwadar Port in Pakistan. Gwadar is a key node in the CPEC, with implications for both economic and military strategy. Its development could allow China to project power in the Indian Ocean and potentially challenge U.S. naval operations in the region. 4. Digital Silk Road. Through this initiative, China aims to establish standards and infrastructure for digital technologies in participating countries. This effort raises concerns about data security and the spread of authoritarian governance, which could counter the democratic values promoted by the U.S. Future outlook. Predictions for U.S. strategic response. 1. Increased countermeasures. The U.S. is likely to escalate its efforts to counter the BRI through initiatives like the Build Back Better World B3W, aimed at providing alternatives to developing countries. This initiative emphasizes transparency, sustainability, and high standards in infrastructure development. 2. Strengthening alliances. The U.S. will continue to strengthen its alliances with countries that share concerns over China's influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad US, Japan, India, Australia will likely play a crucial role in coordinating responses to the BRI. 3. Focus on technological standards. The U.S. will emphasize promoting its own technological standards in digital infrastructure projects, particularly in cybersecurity and telecommunications, to counter the influence of Chinese technologies in developing nations. 4. Exploiting BRI vulnerabilities. The U.S. can capitalize on growing disillusionment among countries participating in the BRI, particularly those facing unsustainable debt burdens. By providing transparent financing options and presenting itself as a reliable partner, the U.S. can attract these nations to alternative development paths. 5. Military posturing. As China seeks to expand its military presence through BRI, the U.S. may enhance its military posture in the Indo-Pacific, conducting more joint exercises and increasing naval presence to deter potential Chinese aggression in critical maritime routes. 6. Promoting global norms. The U.S. will likely continue advocating for a rules-based international order, positioning itself as a champion of democratic governance and human rights, contrasting with China's authoritarian model promoted through the BRI. 7. Regional infrastructure initiatives. The U.S. may support regional infrastructure initiatives in Southeast Asia and Africa as alternatives to the BRI, focusing on projects that are environmentally sustainable and socially responsible. Conclusion. In summary, the Belt and Road Initiative represents a multifaceted challenge to U.S. interests globally, particularly in terms of influence, security, and economic competition. As China continues to expand its reach through strategic projects, the United States is expected to respond with a combination of diplomatic, economic, and military strategies aimed at countering this influence while promoting its own vision for the future of international development. The upcoming years will be critical as the U.S. navigates this complex landscape of great power competition.